everyone, Michael Liseo here at Highview Productions, and today I have a great opportunity to film at one of the most historic refurbished mansions in Connecticut. This mansion behind me been through 3 different stages throughout its lifetime so far. The first stage, when it was owned and built by a colonel. The second stage, when it was a house for nuns. And the third stage, a very dark stage, when it was abandoned for around 7 years and was a hot spot for vandalism and theft. Now, Highview Productions will take you inside and show you this exquisite mansion. So we're going to enter through the front door and see what this mansion has to offer. Hello there. Hi, Michael.
Hello, Michael. It's
Nice
good
to
to have you here. I'm Joyce Kirkpatrick, and I want to welcome you to the mansion on this a little cloudy but nice summer day.
Oh, this mansion is
Perfect
beautiful.
time.
As soon as you walk in, you can just see the architect is top of the line here. So tell me, what's the style like? Is it like a Newport theme type of style?
Well, the architect was asked to do this early in the 1900s, and at that time people were building house beautiful country-style mansions.
I see.
And the idea was to have a very impressive large front and a very narrow house, so as you walked in the door, you could already see out to the
Right
back.
to the backyard, I
this
see, yeah.
vista that we have here, and in its day, that was twice as long as it is now.
That is fascinating, yes.
So, but I'd like to introduce you to the man and later to the woman who are responsible for this house. If you
Of
come
course, the
here.
Colonel, right?
Yes, Colonel Clarence Seymour Wadsworth had his portrait painted for that spot, and it shows him in his governor's foot guard uniform. And he was probably about 40 when he had the picture painted. However, he gave the photographer a photograph of himself when he was in his 20s. You've come in the front hall, and this was where guests came in, and they were supposed to be extremely impressed. So Mrs. Wadsworth had some of this lovely old furniture here. And here we have a photograph that's rather interesting of Colonel Wadsworth and his 2 sons, and they are standing in front of the very pillars that you just walked past.
Right in front,
yes. In the front of the house. The back of the photograph had in Mrs. Wadsworth's handwriting, Armistice Day, 1927.
Wow.
Which Armistice Day was a national holiday to mark the end of the First World War.
Yes, so that's right after World
was the
War.
war that was going to end all wars. Oh, how about going into Mrs. Wadsworth's reception room? That's what she would do with her guests.
Of course, yes.
Yes, come in.
Wow, yes, beautiful.
Well, it's especially interesting because on this wall we have a timeline of the whole Wadsworth history of this place. So it starts in 1897, the Wadsworths were married, and they began planning to have a nice house out in the country. They lived in a house down by the river in Middletown, and it was getting much too busy. The train was going through and it would rattle.
Oh, right down near the Connecticut River.
Yes.
Okay.
His mother's house, it's still there. It's the Chomen Community House. And they thought they would like to move out into the country. And finally they decided on this land. Mm-hmm. And Colonel Wadsworth bought land from Catherine Hubbard's family.
So when did they start the foundation and construction? What year?
It was 1908.
1908.
When they poured the foundation.
So they started construction in 1908.
Yes, and the house had been planned by a very well-known architect by the name of Francis Hoppin. He had worked with McKim, Mead & White, which is a firm that was responsible for the New York Public Library and for many of the Newport mansions, including the Breakers and Rosecliff.
Oh, wow, yeah.
When we go out and back, you'll see how this house resembles Rosecliff.
Okay.
And Hoppin was working for McKim, Mead & White at the time and worked on Rosecliff, so I think it's partly his plan. Or maybe
so it's kind of a copycat
Yeah.
In some ways.
Artists do that. They're always influenced by something else. Yes. So in 1908, they poured the foundations, and it took them about 3 years. A local firm by the name of O'Brien were the builders, and they built this house out of reinforced concrete, which was very new.
So that's why this place is still standing when it was abandoned.
That's right, yes. It's built like a fort.
I see.
And I think Colonel Wadsworth liked that because it saved trees. He didn't have to chop down any trees in order to build it, and it was fireproof.
I see.
So,
how thick were the walls? About 16 inches, you would say? Something
I
around
think
there?
16 to 18. I think it varies a little bit.
Yeah.
But they're, yeah.
So over
Very-
a foot thick
very
of
thick,
concrete.
yes.
Wow. Yeah.
So
That is fascinating.
It's built for the ages. He wanted something that would last.
For
Yes.
a long time.
Yes.
A long time. Yes.
And so they lived here for a number of years, for almost 40 years. The Wadsworths lived here. This was one of 6 homes that they owned, however. So they weren't here all the time. Sometimes they were up in Maine at Bar Harbor. Sometimes they were down in Florida. They also had property in Chicago and in New York City. And there was a place in Bermuda as well.
Wow. So the Wadsworths were quite the travelers.
They were.
Yes.
They were indeed. And these are a few of the photographs we have of the grounds, which are very interesting the way they were developed. And then the Tunis house is out there. It's been restored, and it's one of the few garden follies that's in its original place.
Wow.
So we're very lucky. And there were lovely gardens around. Mrs. Wadsworth loved flowers, and there are other pictures here, but then when Mrs. Wadsworth had been widowed, Colonel Wadsworth died in 1946 or 41. She decided that she would stay in New York in their house.
So she moved out of the
and
mansion.
she decided she was going to close up the mansion.
And is that when the nuns bring their?
Yes.
They came to stay, and did they teach, or was it more for schooling?
Well, they
or
did
was it housing?
a lot of things. They were here for as long as the Wadsworths had been here. They were here for 40 years.
Wow.
And their order was called the Religious of Our Lady of the Cenacle. And the cenacle was what most people in Middletown called it. And the nuns here would teach the children catechism. They would teach adults too. There was also a lot of meditation that would go on here. It was a very peaceful place. They were here for 40 years.
Until 1986.
Yes, and they converted the Wadsworth's room that they had called the billiard room into a chapel. So
Wow.
it was a chapel that the nuns used.
That is fascinating. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it is lovely. They ran into some financial problems. They had another convent in Long Island. So they decided they were going to have to sell this.
They
and
couldn't
go
afford
to-
both of them. They
No,
had to close
no.
one or the other.
Right,
I
yeah.
see.
So they sold it to a developer, and he flipped it and sold it to another developer. The first developer made $1 million and retired.
Oh my.
The second developer had a plan that he was going to take all the woodland and turn it into a big golf course. And this was going to be sort of a clubhouse or something. And then he was also going to build many, many condominiums on it.
That didn't work
But
out, I
it
guess.
did not
No.
work out. So his financial future was not very good, and he went bankrupt. And so the bank that held this was an out-of-town bank, and they just left the house unlocked, untended. It was way back here in the woods. And so people started seeing it as a place where they could come and
So it was abandoned at this point.
and pillage it,
Yeah.
yes. And they stole hardware, they stole tiles, they stole the copper off the roof. And then
Wow.
the water started coming in to the house and ruining it.
They set a lot of fires, as I could tell.
There were a number of fires, and the fire department would come out and put them out. There was one particularly bad fire. It was in what had been the chapel, in what we now call the West Ballroom. And it was so intense that the I-beam that was supporting the ceiling and the floors above it expanded and then just burst right through the wall.
Wow.
And that was the fire when one of the firemen came to the chief and said, are we really going to save this place? You know, we keep
Yeah.
coming out here, fire after fire.
They're
Why don't
probably
we
like,
just
"Just
let it burn? It's, give up. And the chief said, no, we're going to save this place. I studied my catechism here, and I want this place saved.
Yes.
And that, I think, is the kernel of what saved this place for the last 18 years to be an excellent business plan.
I see.
So there are weddings here, there are conferences, meetings, and it's open to the public periodically. There are free concerts on the lawn in the summer. There's a lot going on. We have docent tours every Wednesday afternoon from 2 to 4. And then there are the wonderful open house days on New Year's Day, Daffodil Day, and there's a big open air market with tents all the way down.
Like
the
a
big
farmer's
lawn.
market.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
wow, yes.
With crafts and food and just lots
So
of fun
you guys
and
keep
music.
the vibe and the positive energy still alive here.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
and
very...
those are the public days.
Yes,
And
yes.
so we're trying to balance the private and the public. But the key to the restoration was that we had to have a referendum. And the citizens had to vote to spend the money because it was going to cost several $1 million. And in fact, it cost over $5 million rather, to restore it.
I go to a lot of abandoned places, and it's always a shame to see so many nice places that just like come to a waste, and it's like almost like, to me, it's almost like at the end of the day, it's like, oh, what a waste of time and money to let a place like this that they spent millions of dollars and time and effort into building and let it just rot away like this. So that's great to hear that the city bought this and restored it and made it as beautiful as it looks right now. Oh, wow. So what room is this called now?
Well, today we call this obviously the bar room, but it's also the family dining room, or it was the family dining room for the Wadsworths, and the bar was not there.
This was not here.
added
Okay.
in the 1990s when they restored the mansion, and we knew that we would need it for the parties. It's worked out very well.
For the weddings and
Right.
everything, yes, yes.
But you may notice what we have up above is a musician's gallery. And when the Wadsworths would be dining down here with their guests, they would have musicians up there playing instruments.
Wow, very fancy.
Early 20th century music.
So this is when there's no radio or music box or anything like that.
That's right.
And this is, they had live entertainment back in that.
Well,
in
of course,
time
that was a
period.
sign that they were wealthy, but yeah. I call your attention to the painting over here because that holds the key to one of the big questions people always ask. They say, well, where did Colonel Wadsworth get the money to build such a building?
I'm guessing that'd be his father here.
That is his father. Very
Yes.
good guess, yes. And that is his father, Julius Wadsworth, who was raised in Connecticut. He was in a large family. His father ran an inn in Hartford, the Wadsworth Inn, and it was on Route 44, which was a main stagecoach route from Hartford to Albany, New York.
Oh, okay.
And we find over here on the wall a certificate that the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad sent to the family when Julius Wadsworth died, and it's expressing their condolences, of course. But then,
thank you letter.
saying he was a great man and he was the vice president of our board of directors. This is what we call our history room, and this has many of the objects that the Wadsworth family has shared with us, that most of which we assume were here at Long Hill.
A lot of artifacts, as I could see.
I know, it's really like a museum.
A little museum, yes, wow.
Well, let me first introduce you to Mrs. Wadsworth. We haven't really introduced her yet, but here is a sculpture done by her son, Julius Wadsworth. After he retired from being a diplomat for the national government, he decided to become a sculptor. And this was his favorite sculpture. He sculpted Catherine Hubbard Wadsworth when she was 63, I think, according to the date. And I think it's a lovely, lovely picture done, or a sculpture done with great love and attention to detail. And she was a handsome woman, very lovely. And
Is this made out of bronze?
it's made out of cast bronze.
Oh, cast
it's very
bronze.
heavy.
Wow, okay.
No. First he sculpts it in wax, and then they use the lost wax process to convert it to make a mold, and
Yes.
then they put the bronze in the mold, and that results in the statue. Yeah. So here we have wonderful candelabra with all kinds of ornate carvings. They would have had candles, and I think they're from Europe. I'm not sure, from
This
a
is
castle
made out
or
of
from
wood?
a chapel. It's wood covered with gilt, and then when they left Long Hill, they were taken to Washington, D.C., where Julius, the son of Colonel and Mrs. Wadsworth, lived, and he and his wife Cleome had them in their townhouse down in Washington, D.C. for about 50 years. It was lovely. They heard about the project of the restoration of Long Hill, and they were so excited about it that they thought, we have no children, why don't we give the objects that have been at Long Hill and which we've enjoyed for 50 years back to this project, back to the mansion. And they did. They gifted us with a great deal of wonderful furniture and paintings and china. So we have this special room to keep them all.
It keeps the historical feeling still here.
Yes, and it gives people a sense of what Long Hill looked like when the Wadsworths lived here.
Wow, look at this fascinating painting here.
That's right. That's one of Mrs. Wadsworth's purchases from France. And I have the feeling she probably went to a gallery in Paris, and the gallery owner said, well, we just have a new shipment from so-and-so chateau, and he's selling off his
castle,
his paintings, right?
Yeah.
And so wouldn't you like a child? You really do need a child with an ornate costume, feeding a parrot a pretzel, and
Yes.
I'd have the very painting for you. And so she said, oh yes, I'd like that.
Oh, I love something like this in my house. Yeah.
Right. Well, they had many, many paintings, and in fact, they hung them side by side, and one up on top and one underneath the other painting. So it was almost like wallpaper.
Wow.
But we don't have quite that many paintings.
Yes,
And
yes. Well,
so-
what era you think this painting was made?
I think that was made in the late 1600s.
Wow.
We did have the people from the Wadsworth Athenaeum come and help clean and conserve all the paintings. And they checked them out very carefully and said there's no way they could figure out who painted it, but
So
it certainly
no
was
names.
of the period.
Unknown artist.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so they thought this was probably late 1600s, I think.
Wow.
If memory serves.
That's
And
old, though.
I may be forgetting just exactly when, but that would be, I think, about right. And then the classical landscape on this wall was also something that was required. Everybody had to have a classical landscape.
Yes.
And it's especially appropriate in this house, which is based, the whole architecture is really based on classical architecture. So you have columns, just like we have in the front of the house, and then a lovely landscape off in the distance. And there are two more exciting paintings in the other room that we'll look at later.
Okay. So these chairs here would be along the side of the wall when you would first arrive inside the mansion. Wow. That is fascinating. And is this made out of wood, it looks like?
It looks like wood that's
carved wood?
painted polychrome
Wow.
with many colors, and each one is different. They each have a medallion in the center with a different kind of face.
Yes. So one's a woman. It looks like this one's a knight.
Right,
And,
right in shining armor.
Yeah, we got two knights and two women right here. Yeah.
So,
And these benches were.
yes, that's a lovely old needlepoint. It's seen better days, but that cover would have been made by hand by women who were doing needlepoint.
Would this
it's
be
probably-
in Mrs. Wadsworth's room, or would this be?
I think it might have been as part of her bedroom suite. If you look at the legs, you'll see that the legs are very similar to the table, which is over here. And this is one of two tables which flanked her bed in her bedroom. So I would guess that was part also of the same set of furniture. We have a number of artifacts, and the Friends of Long Hill gave money to create, out of a simple closet, a lovely display case. And
Wow.
it has a glass glass window. So everything is safe, but people can see some of the treasures that the Wadsworths had. And so if you start at the top, you have a picture of the old long hill and also a bugle, which I believe they probably took on some of their military expeditions and camping trips with the boys and things like that. On the next two shelves are some of the monogrammed dinnerware, which the Wadsworths used for very special occasions.
It has a W in it for the Wadsworths.
That's right. Wow. Yes.
So they had their own silverware made just for them.
They did,
with their last name and everything.
Right.
Wow, that is amazing.
And even the glasses have W's. This not many people use these anymore. They're called finger bowls. And each place setting would have a finger bowl filled with water and perhaps a few rose petals in it. And should you get your fingers a little soiled by the food you were eating, you could dip your fingers in the water and then wipe it discreetly on the napkin.
I see.
And therefore you kept your hands very clean.
Something you don't see in today's century at all.
No,
yes.
I don't think I've ever seen anybody use a finger bowl. We have on the next shelf these two silver, they're German silver, champagne coolers, and they had a glass lining and then were filled with shaved ice, and a champagne bottle would be put into that. And over in the corner you see a picture of the Wadsworth's first grandchild. Her name was Catherine.
Wow.
And she was the daughter of Seymour Wadsworth, which was the other son. Down below we see some things that were Colonel Wadsworth's. We've already talked about how he loved metrics. And here is a folding metric ruler. Yes, all the centimeters there. And in the sword is in a silver scabbard, and it is inscribed. I don't know if you can read the inscription.
It says, Lieutenant C.S. Wadsworth, 12th Infantry.
New York City.
Yeah. And it says and an NY for New York City. Wow, so that was his personal sword that he would carry on him.
Yes.
Wow.
And it very much resembles the sword in the painting that's at the head of the stairs.
At the top of the staircase, yes.
Down below you see an ebony and ivory walking stick. He used to like to walk and hike.
Or a cane, kind of.
A cane. And a very decorative sword that has no inscription, and we don't know anything about it. And then in the corner there's a genealogy of the Wadsworth family. The Wadsworths were very important. The first Wadsworth came from England, William Wadsworth, in 1630 something. But one of the interesting things is Colonel Wadsworth was very much an environmentalist. And so here we have a sign that he posted on his property to keep people out. And I think the writing and the message on that is very much conservation.
Basically like a no trespassing sign, but in the early 1900s form, because it has a lot of wording in there, like big wording that you wouldn't use today.
Right.
Yes.
And it cautions people not only not to bring in firearms,
but no fishing or anything.
Right.
Yes.
And you're not to bother the birds, and you're not to steal their nests, which people used to collect birds' nests. I can't imagine why, but that doesn't appeal to me.
But he wanted everything. Don't come on my land, he's saying, and don't touch it. Leave it how it is, and you don't belong here.
That's right. It's my land. Yeah. Now this is the ballroom. At least that's what we call it. And there are two rooms like this in the house. They're both the same size, and they are sort of balanced. In fact, balance is one of the classical attributes of this kind of architecture.
Wow.
So,
are those the original chandeliers, or are those replicas?
Those are replicas of what might have been here.
Okay.
We really had to guess. Because this is
somewhat similar.
Right.
Okay.
This is the room that was the chapel.
Oh, so this is where the guns were.
Burned.
Yes, and this is the room that got destroyed in that fire.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah. So you never know it today.
Yeah, they must have reframed the columns and everything. The
I-beam
that you were talking about. Where would that I-beam be? Right about?
It's under that paneling.
Okay.
It's still there.
It's still so they put it. They covered it.
Well, I think they had to put in a different I-beam because the one expanded and then it was sticking out of the wall.
Wow.
And they had to. So that was something that Cronenberger did when they were fixing this house up. Well, here we have one of the paintings I was talking about that I think Catherine Wadsworth bought in Paris. And it's perfect for this room, which is used for weddings, because it shows a festivity, a celebration.
Very joyful.
It is very joyful. We have someone playing a tambourine, dancers. They're all dancing around the statue of Bacchus, who is the god of wine and celebration.
So everyone's having a good time.
Everybody's having a good time. These are wine flagons or vessels. Someone is probably telling a fortune, a soothsayer. And then over here, this poor goat has got his legs out like this, and he's being hauled in, and I suspect he's going to be a sacrifice.
I was just going to say, like, slice its neck or something like that.
So it's all quite a story for a place where there are many parties. So this is a scene from Greek mythology, the classical stories that they used to tell. And the king of the gods was known as Jupiter, or Zeus.
Yeah, Zeus.
And Zeus always had an eye for pretty women. And one day he took a fancy to this lady in a blue dress. And her name was Europa. And Europa was someone that he thought he would like to take off with him to his dwelling up on Mount Olympus. And she was not sure she wanted to go with him. So he disguised himself for some strange reason.
Is that an ox? Is that an ox?
Yes, a white ox or a white bull.
Wow.
And I certainly can't imagine why this lovely young lady thinks he's so cute that she's going to ride on his
ox.
back. But the story goes on, and suddenly Zeus flies away with her to Mount Olympus.
Wow.
And these are all her sort of serving maids. There's a little Cupid peeking through the tree up there. Yeah. Of course, he's the sign of love, and there are flowers.
So another very positive vibe.
Right.
Well, once again, just like the other painting we looked at.
Now, who knew that they could develop a story in classical times?
Oh, yeah.
for this place.
This mantle was once in the West Ballroom, but now is located in the East Ballroom. This is the same mantle that the nuns had in their chapel. This lantern you see came from Europe and was designed by an ironworker who made lanterns for the White House. He also made the main gates and many other lanterns for the National Cathedral. And these cracks you see in the hallway were created during the time period when the mansion was abandoned. This second floor hallway you see is now remodeled due to the vandals that set fire to it. What you see now is the beautiful vista, which used to be twice as long as it looks today. When the Wadsworths lived here, this vista was equal to 5 to 6 football fields, with cedar trees lining the edges. Now, Joyce and I will take you to the surrounding trails, which used to be an old carriage route. As we continue down the old carriage route, you can see the old remains of a stone wall, which used to be on both sides of the road. And as we traveled down the path, we discovered an abundance of different wildlife and plants.
Oh, look, here's a trout lily, and surrounded by baby trout lilies. This one has bloomed. It has a lovely little, like a yellow lily flower about that big. But wildflowers abound here in the forest, and that's one of the joys of being in the woodland in the springtime.
Further up the path, there is another trail that used to be the main road to the mansion, welcomed by a magnificent stone wall made out of brownstone.
It's all brownstone, which may have been quarried in a quarry nearby here. And one of the interesting things at this crossroads is that there were two significant old trees. And we have one of them still standing here.
Wow.
This giant white oak is so old, it was referred to as the Old Oak, even in 1910, when the map was made.
So this tree, if we had to take a guess, was maybe around 1700s when George Washington would be traveling down here, and before the Wadsworth time.
Oh, way before the Wadsworth.
If the Wadsworth said this was the old tree, then
right.
it must have been old for them too. So
right.
This tree is definitely, if I had to take a guess, good 300 years old probably.
I think that's perfectly possible.
Yeah.
I'm not a tree expert.
No,
so.
me neither. But if anyone out there is a tree expert and would know better than us, please put a comment. But my guess is just from the size of it and the trunks, a good 300 years old. If that's possible.
I think so, and so it stands here very proudly at the head of what was called White Oak Lane.
So you would enter to this huge,
yes.
beautiful scenery and property, and you're like, wow, this guy owns so much land.
Mm-hmm.
It's overwhelming.
Well, imagine, remember when this land was developed, automobiles were very new, and they were still using carriages as well as the newest automobiles. I walked on this property with a grandson of Colonel Wadsworth, and as we walked through here, we were talking about the stone wall and about how you come up the hill and suddenly you were confronted with this wonderful vision of this white mansion in the woods. And he said, oh, well, then the stone wall means that it's time to straighten your tie and get ready to go meet the Wadsworths.
Oh, yeah. It's getting, you're getting close. That's what it means.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. So
this
is
ready.
the way the landscape architects created something that would be a hint for people.
Very jumping. Yeah.
Okay, you're almost there now.
Yeah, you better get ready.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's some special features that I want to show you on the stone wall. So why don't we walk on down?
Yeah, let's go check it out. So as you could tell, I'm right now climbing up on the stone wall, and this is the stile here, which they would call it. In today's version, we'll probably call it steps, but back then they would call it a stile. And they're basically stones that come out of the structure here, and they're built into the structure. So it really makes it look, as you could tell, each stone isn't really perfectly carved, I would say. It's more very original, and it's supposed to look very exotic, I guess you could call it. And it's still to this day, still could climb up, and my guess is probably workers or someone that had to go on the other side. Instead of climbing over the wall, you would climb up these steps. So this stone wall behind me was also a deterrent for cows and cattle. It would prevent the cattle, and the cattle would go through these woods behind this wall, and it would prevent them from getting on the road, because back then, even though the Wadsworth preferred horse and buggy, every now and then there tend to be early 1900s automobiles driving up and down these roads. And the last thing you want is your brand new Model T getting hit by a cow. So it was a good deterrent, and it prevented them from getting, I'm sure it wasn't just about the traveling, but I'm sure the Wadsworths just did not want cows on their road where their visitors would be going up and down. So it was a good deterrent to prevent them from passing by.
As we come to the end of the wall, we return to the mansion, feeling like a welcomed guest, arriving to see the Wadsworths.
Thank you for watching this video. If you're interested in learning more history about the Wadsworth Mansion, they actually hold docent tours here every Wednesday from 2 to 4 p.m. and they also do private tours. If you're interested in learning about the public and private events held here, they actually have a great website you can go check out. It's at www.wadsworthmansion.com. If you're into exploring the outdoors like myself and hiking and looking at the wildlife in Connecticut, this place has miles of trails that go around the mansion. But not just around the mansion, some trails actually connect to the Wadsworth Falls State Park, which is owned by the state of Connecticut, and I think it's around 10 miles of forest. So if you're into hiking and exploring the outdoors, this is a great place to come to. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and while you're at it, please subscribe. And trust me, just that one click of the button, it helps me out so much, words can't even describe, and it gets me, every subscriber I get is like one step closer to my dreams coming true. So please, do that for me, it will help me out so much. But that all being said, stay tuned for the last about minute and 30 seconds and check out the credits and look at all the people that helped me make this video possible. And because if it wasn't for them and the opportunity I got to come here to film and all the people that helped me film and doing the drone and everything, the video would have never came out as good as it did, or it probably would have never even happened in the first place. So please stay tuned and check out the credits. But that being said, my name is Michael Liseo, and I'll see you in the next video.